told her I'm laying on a heating pad today, so y'all forgive me.
You're forgiven, but there's no
Okay.
need for any forgiveness.
I'm very comfortable, so get comfy.
Okay, I am.
Exactly.
Don't worry.
Exactly. There's really, I mean, you know, I used to teach, who knows, maybe I will again, movement classes, like sort of creative
Oh,
movement where I would just guide people into their bodies, not dance steps. I taught that years ago. But, you know, I always told people, just come as you are. You could lay down in a movement class the entire time and get a ton out of it. So if ever you need to lie down or close your eyes or anything, just do that.
okay.
Because your presence is here, and we certainly in a workshop like this do not want anybody to suffer. It's for
Right.
it's for holding and support. So, you know, if anybody ever just feels a little off, then
Right.
do what you need
That's
to do.
nice.
Yeah, it's important to take care. Ay, ay, ay. My mom is visiting. She's calling
Oh,
me. Excuse myself for 1 second.
sure.
Hey, Mom, I'm just starting my meeting.
That's nice.
It's in the drawer. Just open up the drawer or under the sink. It'll be there. Okay.
I'm gonna have to duck out a few minutes early. I guess I can let Padma know, but I have a meeting.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah, I'm just going to put this on Do Not Disturb.
Perfect. I have a meeting right at 11, another virtual one, so I'll have to pop out a few minutes early so I can get set up for that. Just so you
Okay.
know.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us know. Well, how's everybody doing while we just
Right.
land? How's your
I
week been?
just heard from Julie. She's not going to make it today.
Hmm.
She's still in line at her appointment. So
Well, we understand.
we will.
Miss you. Anything else that's been cooking or that came up during the week that you want to make note of, or something you practiced?
Give it a minute. I'm around. Been working on forgiving, and I haven't practiced the I can't say it, but
Ho'oponopono.
yeah, that one.
A lot of vowels.
Hi, Phyllis.
Hi, Phyllis. Nice to see you. I think you're still muted, darling. Phyllis. There you go. We should be able to hear you. Say something.
There we go. Okay.
Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Laura.
Good morning, Laura. Yeah, we miss you all when you're not able to make it, and of course, sometimes
know.
not able to make it. It's just how it goes. So, anything else that was just happening? Working on forgiveness. How's the self-forgiveness going?
Mhm.
Slowly.
I'll say slowly.
Even by just holding the possibility of self-forgiveness, it's like the idea is just kind of floating around. You might kind of like glance by it, you know, at some point as you're moving around in your world and say, oh yeah, right. I felt that. That was the invitation to self-forgiveness. Okay.
I feel like I've been laughing at myself more in a nice way, where just like being able to treat things with more lightness. And I don't know if that's like almost a form of forgiveness, because it's almost like instead of a judgment hammer, it's just kind of like, oh, you're being silly, or you know, or it's like, oh, look at you, like that was a funny way to respond to that, or so I feel like in a good way, like just a little bit of lightness where I don't have to take myself so seriously all the time.
Oh, such a relief.
Mhm.
Does anyone not tend to take themselves too seriously? I mean, you don't? Great.
No,
I love that.
I think that in my mind, I'm still 16.
Mhm.
And not my body, but my mind.
Mhm.
So that's a good feeling most of the time.
Yeah,
Try not to adult any more than I have to.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I was trying too hard to adult at 16.
Oh dear.
I was operating above my pay grade.
Oh dear.
Wow. I definitely was not adulting at 16.
Nah, me either.
I was going to Grateful Dead concerts.
Yeah.
That was not adulting
No.
by a long shot. What about you, Laura? How you doing?
I'm good. I
Yeah.
thought I had a whole map out at 16. I had a plan. And I took
Nice.
it pretty seriously.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But
It's true. I thought I knew everything at 16.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Which is good because my child is 15 and she seems to know a lot.
You're there.
We're there.
Oh yeah.
We're in the zone for sure. Phyllis, anything you want to share about how you are, or we haven't seen you for a little while?
This is why I don't like missing, because I've obviously missed a lot. You had a session on forgiveness.
We did.
Yeah, and see, I needed that. So I'll have to go watch your recording. Yeah.
Yeah, you're always welcome to do that. Yeah, forgiveness is a process, and today we're gonna endeavor into the waters of vulnerability. They're kind of intertwined. You know. Well, I was kind of giving Katie another minute. She may show up. She often comes after her night shift, which is kind of mind-boggling, really.
Really.
It is. It's like, wow. Something. I wanted to read a little bit from this book, which I have read from before. Just, Consolations, David White's Consolations. This book, I used to read it every morning in the hot tub. It would get sort of like wet, but I read it anyway because it was good. So we'll just receive this and see where it touches, if it lands. Vulnerability is not a weakness, a passing indisposition, or something we can arrange to do without. Vulnerability is not a choice. Vulnerability is the underlying, ever-present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. Vulnerability is the underlying, ever-present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. To run from vulnerability is to run from the essence of our nature. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to become something we are not, and most especially to close off our understanding of the grief of others. More seriously, in refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential title and conversational foundations of our identity. He puts a lot in there.
Wow.
More seriously, in refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential title and conversational foundations of our identity. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I could read the whole thing, actually. It's not that long. To have a temporary, isolated sense of power over all events and circumstances is a lovely, illusionary privilege, and perhaps the prime and most beautifully constructed conceit of being human, and especially of being youthfully human. But it's a privilege that must be surrendered with that same youth, with ill health, with accident, with the loss of loved ones who do not share our untouchable powers, powers eventually and most emphatically given up as we approach our last breath. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Our choice is to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss, robustly and fully, or conversely, as misers and complainers, reluctant and fearful always at the gates of existence, but never bravely and completely attempting to enter, never wanting to risk ourselves, never walking fully through the door. David White. Masterful expression. Let's just take that into a meditation and see what's here around vulnerability. So just take a few breaths, letting your body settle, letting the echoes of the words wash through you. Every breath is an invitation to encounter our own palpable vulnerability. Receiving your breath, recognizing that in this moment, the breath of life is flowing through you. Simply letting yourself take this time to receive yourself in this tender, vulnerable state of being human. And as a rare mother, you have a depth of experience with vulnerability that is perhaps unparalleled. The vulnerability of your child or children, their health, the vulnerability of loss, and how truly precarious and vulnerable this life is, even when we appear to be in robust health. So breathing and savoring this moment And then perhaps feeling the vulnerability that comes with relating in your marriage. The vulnerability of leaning in and sharing what is alive in your heart. What is it that shrouds your ability to be vulnerable? Because sometimes we all back away from vulnerability. It can be scary or seem like too much. I'm just sensing your heart right now. And how it is perhaps vulnerable to show up in this safe space of our community, to share yourself. Just breathing into the heart and noticing how your own heart dances with this invitation to be vulnerable. Vulnerable rather than protected or reactive. Breathing and noticing, what is it that invites vulnerability? And what gets in the way in your relationship? So let's take a few minutes, just maybe 5 minutes, and reflect on what invites us to be vulnerable. How do we invite vulnerability in this dance? What interferes? What invites you to be vulnerable? And if you don't want to reflect on those questions, you can reflect on any aspect of vulnerability. This is your time. Just taking a little bit more time to see what's here. And if you're done, just enjoy moments of peace. Just finishing up. I'm curious what came up about vulnerability for you, either in your relationship or as a rare mother.
In reflecting, I felt like some of the things that we've talked about just as good relationship advice, it all invite vulnerability, right? Which makes sense. And in particular, having like that 90% kind of good good communication, kind of building each other up to that 10% kind of more criticism is really important, right? Because that makes it feel like a safe space. And with that, like non-sexual touch and like quality time seems really important to me. And then as like antithesis to that, the kind of uneven ability to be vulnerable is tough. Like I think when one, I don't know, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, but like if one partner is more willing to be vulnerable in a moment, you know, it's interesting. I feel like sometimes one person can be vulnerable and the other is really able to hold it. But sometimes it's, you know, it stresses in the way or distraction or, you know, whatever it is, similar to like having a tough conversation, you know, having a vulnerable shares, perhaps like, I think it was you, Susie, who said like, it's good to like, or maybe it was Katie who's like, give like a warning blow or like, hey, I really got to be vulnerable here for a second. So that the other person can kind of digest their stress or be present for it. So, and then the last thing that came to mind was just like childhood kind of learned behaviors on like what is okay and what is not okay within vulnerability. And I think we've all had lessons on that. You know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is actually ironically like do you guys know that term?
Where does it? Yeah.
So it's from, I think it's from England, but the history of it is that it was said satirically, like, oh, just try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And like, that's never going to work. But now Americans have taken it and been like, yeah, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So it's kind of like interesting that it's like reversed in America. Hi, Katie.
Welcome, Katie.
Welcome.
Hi, good morning. I can't find a private space here because the hospital is so full. So I'm sort of in the corner of a lounge and I don't think I should remove my mask.
Wow,
But
thank you for showing
sorry
up
I'm so
the
late.
corner of the lounge, girl. Wow.
That's
I
amazing.
didn't want to miss this.
I'm so glad. Are you at Marin General? Is that where you are?
I am. Yeah. So Padma and I live in the same county, although we've never met. I am. We have a very full NICU and I just came out of the OR from our 6th delivery in 4 hours. So it's a good day to be born.
Good day to be born. Indeed. Yeah, we're talking about vulnerability. So birth is right on track. Such a vulnerable experience of giving birth and coming into this world. Yeah, Laura, thank you. The familial conditioning, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like, you know, yeah, what's okay. Like we don't talk about our feelings. Did anyone grow up with that? We don't say anything. Yeah, right. We just don't say anything. Or here's another version is we yell our feelings at each other. That's what I grew up with. We yell. If we're having feelings, we just blast each other with our feelings. So that's also not an effective way to create a safe space. Yeah, so it's really kind of almost like emerging or repatterning, discovering healthy ways or ways that it's even possible to be vulnerable and share feelings and have your feelings held. And I don't know if I can say something, but does anybody want to say something about your question, Laura, about sort of the inequity in the in the vulnerability. That one person is just, I saw a few people nodding. I mean, I think as women, we might tend to lead more and be, maybe have a little more capacity, innate capacity for being vulnerable, maybe more in naturally in contact with feelings. I mean, that's a generalization, and it is my experience actually. So does anybody want to say anything about that in your relational dynamic? Are you leading the way in open, vulnerable communication? Susie, you want to say something about that? I feel like there's something in there that you're nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I definitely lead on that component. And I just was thinking a little bit about why that is. And I actually was having another conversation with a group of women, and we were actually talking about like our cycles and like your menstrual cycle. And I just was wondering too, where it's like almost that inherent like experience as a woman of being like having things happen to you that's out of your control every month, or like not feeling in control of your body, or those kinds of things that just inherently reminds us how in that part of life that is vulnerability, that we don't have like the luxury of ignoring it as much as I feel like men can or are able or forced to ignore it. So I just, that kind of came to mind. And then one of the things I wrote down, the first word I wrote down actually was about vulnerability, was the invitation. And I think it feels so much like being vulnerable is an invitation for someone to join you. And again, it's that like, is it that 90-10, you know, like how often are people accepting my invitation, and how often is it just sitting there and not being held, and it's just getting dropped on the ground, or, you know, finding that ratio so that you can learn that vulnerability is okay. And obviously we have very different experiences in our holding environments of how often that vulnerability is accepted and held, and how often it's rejected. So, and translating into relationships as well. So I just was thinking of it as an invitation, you know, that is something that has to be accepted on both sides. Otherwise, it's not, I don't know what one way vulnerability would look like. Or like, I wish there was another term for it, but I'm just thinking of it as like kind of a two-way street, and just trying to.
Definitely.
But then there's vulnerability with yourself as well. So I was just kind of thinking it in relationship, but then also being vulnerable with yourself, and how often are you, you know, responding in that self relationship too. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think vulnerability when it's not received is that feeling of being dropped. Is that feeling of when you say something coming from, you know, really that's tender. I don't know if you ever get that. Sometimes it'll be like a tightening in my throat, or a little bit of a quivering, or even sometimes if I'll get this intense, like kind of almost pain in my hands when something is really hard to say. My body said emotions are very somaticized for me. And, you know, and then if it's not received or acknowledged, you know, heartfully, if there's like no response, like I've heard about, I know of a situation where, you know, the woman or the female was talking and saying something that was so tender, so vulnerable, really hard to say. Vulnerability takes immense courage. You have to really kind of be with yourself, have your back, feel like you're it's worth saying, like it's okay to say, and actually your voice matters. And so they said something, and the male in the dynamic, it was a father-daughter, did not even respond. No response. That's what it could look like. One person is like sharing something that's really hard to say and tender, and the other person just doesn't say anything. Now, as we've talked about, there are different processing speeds having nothing to do with intelligence, just like, whoa, I mean, like that has to ripple through, and then I'll come back to you. And I think it's a good skill if your partner has a slower processing speed and they need to kind of sit with it and kind of digest it, or mull it over, journal, or go on a run and, you know, or walk and process it. It's great to be able to say, I thank you. I heard that. I'm going to respond to you later. Like, I'm not sure what to say. And I heard you. Even just that amount is that holding that we pointed to here. And I think there are conditions to vulnerability that invite vulnerability, which is kind of what you pointed to, Laura. You know, it is. It's like if there's space and spaciousness, if kindness is flowing between us, if there's discord and dissonance and we're arguing, that is not a setup for vulnerability. And so then to communicate what's really going on, I was just looking at this yesterday for myself and how to say something, you know, that's not going to be laced with frustration and that's going to really point to the tenderness and that's going to express my essential need rather than be, I mean, my tendency is to be very direct and maybe to make a demand rather than a request. I have to like really interrupt that because it's just, you know, the conditioning. We all have different conditioning. And if your conditioning is to more pull back and hide a little bit, okay, Katie, that sounds good. Yeah. So just recognizing what are the, like it's a garden. What are the ideal conditions for the garden of vulnerability to flourish? So what else did you discover about vulnerability or your relationship to vulnerability? Or feel free to just keep riffing on whatever's being shared. Sherry, looks like you're unmuting. No? Phyllis, either one of y'all?
Good subject for today. Last week, my son was in Hawaii and he fell and punctured his shin, and it was so deep and it didn't heal well. And he ended up having this infection going all the way up his leg. And he's 57 years old. He's 6 foot tall, and he's a big guy. He's like a Hawaiian guy. You know, he's a big guy. And so I was really concerned that he might lose his foot or his leg if he didn't take care of this. And nowadays with COVID, people don't want to go in the hospital and stuff like that. Thank goodness my future daughter-in-law was with him and got him into the urgent care. But the vulnerability part really affected me because it took me back to when my sons were ill and I couldn't save them. I couldn't stop what was happening. And I was involved with doctors and all these kinds of things. So that was pretty scary and made it hard for me to function, which is one of the reasons I didn't show up for our meetings. But that sounds like an excuse. Anyway, I was grateful for what you read and for this discussion because vulnerability is a state of being or a condition. And sometimes you're vulnerable, but I liked what you read because it helped me to see that we're born vulnerable and it's part of our human makeup. And so it isn't something that I can control by changing environment, although I think that you can help to control it by changing your thinking and your perspective. And the other thing that I thought of was that article in the LA Times, Phyllis Richet's children. Remember I told you that once that was written and it described everything, that was my ability, or it gave me the ability to not open up. I could just refer people to that article
Mm.
And at the time, I didn't have angel aid. I didn't have people that I could talk to. And I didn't want to be vulnerable. So that gave me an escape. I could let them read the article and I didn't have to talk about it.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that that was I did that because it helped me feel less vulnerable
Hmm.
at the time. And I am going through a struggle right now that Angel has been so good for me, but on the other hand, it also has opened up issues that I'm having to deal with that I didn't deal with back then. And so thank you, ladies, for being here so that I can come when I'm able and hear what you say and share because yeah, I'm going through a struggle right now. And I appreciate everything that you say. I write it down and reread it. That's all.
Oh, thank you so much, Phyllis. Yeah. We are so grateful that you're here and that you come just as you are in all your tenderness and everything, just as you are. Mm. And that's it's a really powerful realization, hiding behind the article and the ability to avoid dialoguing with someone because you could just say, refer them to the article. Mm.
Crystal has asked me to do a blog, and I have been resisting this for months because now I know why. It makes me vulnerable. It's that part of me that would be open up and people would respond to what I say, and then I would need to respond to them. And I've wanted to do it because I'm a journalist, but I haven't wanted to do it and I didn't know why I didn't want to do it. Now I know why. I can't hide behind a blog.
Mm-hmm.
If you share that and you are exchanging ideas with people, then you have to be open and you have to be vulnerable. So I don't know, maybe we'll get there. um,
It sounds like you're getting closer. And you'll do it when you're ready. There's no rush. But what else is moving you all? Please jump in.
I just wanted to say to you, Phyllis, directly that you bring so much to this community in these talks, and whether or not you do a blog, you've absolutely been a wonderful kind of maternal figure here for me. So thank you, and don't feel like you're not doing enough because you are.
I was also going to say too, sometimes you need that space, and it's not that a coping mechanism is necessarily bad. Like saying like, okay, refer to this for now, and being able to put a pin in it. Sometimes it's that like, I'm going to refer back to this later isn't bad either. Like that was what you needed at the time. And if you need that same thing with, I'm going to write 2 blogs and then like, okay, that's enough for now. And I need to take a break. And so I think I'm trying to remove the judgment about what I need as being good or bad, and just saying like, but this is just what I need right now. And as long as it's not toxic to me or other people, or, how you deliver that information matters. But at the end of the day, like needing space or time or feeling like you have the capacity for vulnerability right now, or you don't, isn't inherently good or bad. It's just a state that is temporary. So.
It's true. Sure. And that's self-care first.
while we were writing, there was a actually, oh, he's right there. There's a hummingbird that was landing on the very tip of this tree outside and going up to the bird feeder that's upstairs. And I just was thinking about them. Like they're so tiny, and their wings move so fast. And I just was like thinking of that, where I'm just like, they're such a tiny little creature, and just thinking about their vulnerability, where it's like, how do you're just like have to flip around and like look for predators all the time. And, and just like, that's part, how they, learn to cope with this world that is, threatening to them and also beautiful. And just thinking how much sometimes humans, we forget that we're like animals that are a part of this world that are trying to survive in this, mortal world, and just trying, I don't know, I just was thinking how we try to deny so much of that. And I liked in your reading that like, you can't deny that is a part of life. Like our shin can get punctured at any moment, and we have this hole, that is out of our control. And, it's just so crazy to think about that. But I also don't really know how to not live like that. Now that like reality has been forced in front of me, it feels like with rare disease and all of that, like, I don't know how I ever did it without it. Because you're just like, what is life when you're not acknowledging that people die and like this is temporary and all of that. And so I don't know, I'm still trying to figure that out, but it's just interesting when you're processing, like, how do you not let that paralyze you? How do you let that like mobilize you at this, which is very difficult, but it's just such a reality that I'm kind of surprised sometimes at how long I made it without that being acknowledged on a regular basis, and then trying to interact with people that aren't acknowledging that on a regular basis and feeling like, I don't know how to interact with you. Like, or I don't know what your experience of this world is. Like, I can't go back to that version of the world. So.
Right. You have to find a bridge to relate to them, and maybe even invite them into your world just by being yourself,
Right.
And I feel like one response to vulnerability is gratitude. It's like, wow, this is vulnerable. Nobody knows how many more breaths any of us or our children and families have. We really don't know. And so that just the gratitude and the recognition, that's what I feel like every time I'm present to the vulnerability of this world with illness and injury, and then hearing about people, something that happened to someone that I know, or extended friends and family. It elicits a response of tenderness, and then this, wow, let me just bow in a little deeper to this life. How can I bow in more fully? And to me, vulnerability is a way of bowing in, because then I'm in contact with my own heart, and then I invite that contact with someone else's heart, as and when I'm able to do that.
That was the other thing that I thought about when you were reading and this whole discussion. And I started writing about the fact that my boys couldn't communicate, but they were vulnerable. They were born vulnerable, just like the rest of us. And they had different, they had different intellects, the three boys. And Jared was more understanding of what was going on with him. But when I think back, I think that that's why they knew they were loved, was because I could see when they were feeling vulnerable. I never used that word. I never sensed that word. It applied to that. But that's when we comfort. And my husband too. We've started now, as I've shared with you, we've started communicating more because of this class that Padma is giving us. And we're more sensitive to each other's times when we're vulnerable, and we share more and we comfort each other more. The other day I said something like, well, something's bothering me, and it was like a defense. Something's bothering me, and until I write about it, I can't let it go. Well, he took that personally. And so something was bothering me about us or him. And so he was very uncomfortable for the next 24 hours. And he told me the next day, he said, well, when are you going to tell me what it is that you wouldn't tell me? And then I realized that I had to tell him what it was about because it wasn't about him. So that was vulnerability in a relationship. But yeah, giving our kids hugs when even, and reassurances, even when we don't know what they're thinking. We all do that as real mothers. Yeah.
Thank you, Phyllis. How about you, Katie or Sherry? You have anything you want to offer up, respond to?
I think I've just been reflecting on what everyone's saying since I missed the meditation and the journaling. I think I realized that I really struggle with vulnerability, and in my partnership, I think sort of unusually, my husband, it's one of his strengths is communication and vulnerability regarding emotion, and I attribute that to he lost his father in childhood to a sort of a decade-long battle with cancer that started when he was a newborn and lost his dad when he was 10, but it really brought their family together through his really, really young formative years. He has 2 older sisters and his mother, and I think they got through it by learning to be vulnerable and communicating and like being in touch with each other and themselves emotionally. And I think, as I hear everyone talk, I think back to my own childhood, and I had 2 very different parents, a mother who was very dramatic and yelled and screamed and cried and just sort of emoted too much sometimes, and sometimes in ways that were challenging to cope with as a child. And my father was the opposite. And I think that I related more to him and saw his method of approaching the world as more successful somehow. And so I think that I have developed some of my habits from that, and sort of sometimes struggle with that aspect of vulnerability in relationship. And I think it also comes in sort of professionally, because I think sometimes with work, there's almost this need to be empathetic with patients, but also like I can't necessarily be, there's sort of a need to relate, but also a need to like hold back a little bit, and you can't be completely vulnerable. And so I think that there's I sometimes end up finding myself using the same techniques that I do at work in my personal life, which is not very effective. Trying to like step back and be too removed. And I think then I end up kind of withdrawing into myself. And I think it comes across a lot with my rare child, because I think sometimes with medical professionals, because I'm a medical professional, then people talk to me differently or expect me to respond very objectively to information that's really devastating on a personal level. And I think that like I sometimes don't feel an invitation in my rare child's care to be vulnerable, because I feel kind of this expectation that's not necessarily stated, but to remain kind of more a little bit more detached or very objective about it. And I think that that's kind of hurt my ability to be vulnerable in situations with my husband or family members when it would be really beneficial. So I feel like I appreciate everyone kind of sharing, and just this like sort of thinking about how my childhood impacts that, how my profession impacts that, and like how I really just need to be conscious of this, because I think it really hurts my ability to kind of be in touch with myself. I think I'm even the sort of self vulnerability. I think I don't allow myself to always even recognize how challenging something is, or to process it in a vulnerable way.
Great awareness. Yeah. The slowing down and asking yourself, well, what am I actually feeling here? And because it sounds like, Katie, there's the mechanism of like feelings, shelve them, like, because I need to, and you do in your profession as a medical professional, or in counseling or nursing, or several of us in these healing arts, you have to have a certain amount of distance to actually be able to help the other person. If we merge with it and we're completely empaths, first of all, it's not even going to be sustainable to be in the healing arts, because you'll just be completely drained. But I wonder how to, raise your awareness, or what are what's the cue? It's like, oh, I'm going into that, sidelining my feelings, and then, pulling back, and to recognize. I think that's a great invitation, great practice, is how do I actually, notice that I'm doing that habit that I've cultivated really well. I've honed that skill. And then how do I behave differently in my private life, with my family, with my friends, with the people I'm really close to. So that could be a good practice. If anybody has anything they want to chime in on. I saw some smiling going on. Yes, Laura.
I just so appreciated, Katie, your language around that. I'm also a medical professional. Bye, Susie.
Thank you.
And so much of what you said rang so true to me. And I've said many times, like, I just want to be the mom. I don't want to be the clinician. And, even like his early intervention team, my son's early intervention team, like kind of are like expecting me to take the lead, because they're like, you know all the resources, what you should, they kind of expect me to know everything. I'm like, it'd be really nice so I've been trying not to, but it eventually comes out that I have this medical background. But I was going to say in response was, I think of myself, or like my thing is being like a dragon mom. That's my language around being this kind of special needs mom, rare mom. I like the language of a dragon mom, because you're like a little bit fierce, a little bit lonely, very protective of your kids. And so I've been using the language of like, I really got to like zip into my dragon suit today when I'm like going into some tough meetings, or, like my son's getting fitted for a wheelchair, and I like know that that's going to be something that's like, if I could like very easily kind of fall to pieces emotionally in front of his care team, and like, they don't need to capture that. Like, I have a therapist for that. And so I'm gonna, zip into my dragon suit, be there, get all the equipment that he needs. And then I can take my dragon suit off and go talk to my husband about it. Or, a professional or a friend. So I like that idea of kind of almost this invisible suit. Maybe it's a little crazy.
I like that a lot. I need some of those like visuals. I mean, just almost like cues for me to like, because I think that actually I rely on, because I'm not as self-aware as I wish I was about this. I sort of rely on my husband to be like, I feel like you're withdrawing, like you're irritable, you're, something's wrong. And I can tell that you don't really want to share, but like, it's really hard for me. I know something's wrong. I wish you would let me in. I kind of rely on those, like him cueing me, like, oh, I need to like unpack something, because I don't have the self-awareness. But I feel like I like the idea of trying to use like,
the dragon suit or something when it comes to certain things. Like I need to like take it off. And I would like to find some things that I can use to cue myself to try to unpack that a little bit so that I'm not relying on, or so that I don't, so that I can be more proactive about kind of that vulnerability. And I would say that like, I think it took me, I don't know, a year and a half or more into my son's diagnosis, and even like almost a year after his bone marrow transplant, to like get a therapist. And I like don't know what I was thinking. I think I was just in survival mode, but that has also like, it's become a specific outlet or, you know, vulnerable space for me. But I feel like I want to start expanding that, you know, more to other people in other settings in which it makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I love the dragon suit, and zipping it up when you need it and then unzipping it. I think Katie is like, okay, I'm home. I don't need my dragon suit. So that's one thing. And the other thing is about, so as a bridge to self-awareness, your husband is already like, he's cueing you. So in the first moment you get the cue, you can say, thank you. I'm just going to notice what's going on in my body right now. Like, because he's pointing to it. So there are definitely some physical sensations, kinds of energy, various thoughts going on. And you can just say, oh, you know, and then you can start to realize, and you'll be able to probably pretty quickly, like anticipate, because you can read, because then you're starting also to be able to read him, right? You're looking over and you're like, oh, something's happening in his physiology. Something's happening in his face. I can read it with my partner so quickly. It's that looking down the nose thing, as a big Roman nose, you know, and I'm like, you're looking down your nose of what's going on. I know something's going on over there, you know, so then I take that as a cue to also examine my responses, my behavior patterns. So tracking that, you can like, you know, appreciate the cue and then slow it down to take a deeper look inside yourself. So that's one thing you can do. Thank you for that. Sherry.
Well, I don't know that I have anything pertinent to share. You guys have done such
You
a
do.
fabulous job. And I do love the dragon suit. And I loved everything Phyllis said, because my kids were born 30 years ago, and we didn't have the internet and the, Angel Aid and any support groups to speak of it. I mean, seriously, in our small town, we didn't. And I actually helped to start one, but then it's like, when am I going to do that with all my appointments? And, everybody looked at me like I had three eyes. When are you going to do that? Run a support group. And I honestly didn't know. And at that time, Amy was about 5. But those first few really years were really, really, really hard. And the vulnerability was all over the place, and then I think I learned to, you know, let it out. And the only problems, well, I have lots of problems, I won't say that, but the problem I have with vulnerability is I'm so vulnerable that I take on everyone else's problems as well. And so I'm on Facebook, and I'm one of the um, support people for this region of the United States, um, for the organization. And so when I hear the stories of these young children, it makes me go to pieces. And my husband finally just said, take a break from Facebook and, be who you are and forget the rest of the world and worry about our problems and what we've got going on. And I've really appreciated it. It's only been a few days, but I'm almost lost without it, but I'm liking the freedom that I have. And yeah, so the vulnerability is all over the place with me.
Mm.
And with him, he's very open to whatever. We really don't have issues um, there. He knows when I need to talk, and I know when he needs to talk, and so that I don't feel um, a problem with. But anyway, you guys have done such a fabulous job of talking about it, and Susie too. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so important. And with the taking on or being so affected, feeling so vulnerable, so open, that sounds like a very empathic way of being. And so maybe the same, I'm going to give this is my go-to. Notice what it feels like when you're taking it on. And then you could say to yourself, oh, I'm starting to merge with this other person's sadness and problems, And so what does it feel like? And I see
I
Laura
just dropped
popped in.
something into the chat box. I'm not like directly related, but this is a wonderful group that I've found. I know like we've talked about the holidays in the past as a time where we might be particularly vulnerable. And Courageous Parents Network is putting on an hour special specifically for the holidays on tomorrow evening. And I just wanted to share it because they hold a lot of amazing space for rare moms and bereaved moms.
It's fantastic.
Also, I've included that in our weekly Sunday email that
Okay.
you should all be on the list for. Yeah, so if you misplace that link, it's in an email that has come from Angel Aid. So we kind of have a friendship partnership with Parents Network. So I'm glad that you enjoy some of their stuff, Laura.
Thank you both. Oh, we're a little bit over time. Are there any last words? Well, I just really appreciate everybody sharing. And I want to say it's vulnerable to share in this group, even though it's safe, it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to say, like what you said, Katie, well, I'm not as self-aware as I would like to be. That's very vulnerable. So I just want to say that I feel like we're all practicing being vulnerable here in this container so that we can do it more often when it's appropriate in our lives and our partnerships. So I'm going to say the practice of slowing down, slow down, notice what you're doing and be a choice. That can be the practice. Like be a choice. Is this a good, am I protecting myself? Do I have my dragon suit on? Am I starting to breathe fire? It's like, or can I unzip it and notice what that's like? And the awareness, just the awareness of what am I doing? And do I want to be doing this? Because if you don't want to be doing this, you can say, you know what? Course correct. I'm going to go this way instead. And you might have to slow it way down if you're in an interaction to say, you know what? I'm going somewhere where I don't want to go. Can you give me a moment to recalibrate internally? Like, let me get a sense of what I need and what I'm capable of right now. And then I can relate to you. You can stop yourself, it's like just grab yourself by your shirt. Just say, hey, wait a minute, slow down. So, well, thank you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Before Thanksgiving. So I hope, are people planning to be here next week, or we're not all going away on Tuesday or anything? Maybe.
I'm going to try. We're going to be in Yosemite next Tuesday, and I don't know if I'll have reception. I'll send a note by Monday evening to let everyone know.
Okay, thank you. Well, if we don't see you, enjoy Yosemite. Perfect time of year to go there.
I will. Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, lovelies. See you soon. Okay, blessings.